Michael, I like to call, I don't know if you know this, I like to call Michael Little Ernie.
Well, when that's very, very realistic
Uh-huh.
thinking, because when Michael was born, before I even saw Michael, Dr. Toomey, when he had just delivered him, he said, I have delivered hundreds and hundreds of babies, and I have never delivered a baby that looks more like his father.
Really?
And then we got baby pictures out of your father and Michael, and they did. They looked very much, very, very much alike.
Huh. I'll be darned. Any memories of Michael growing up? Or no, he used to like the mustard sandwiches.
Oh, yes.
Remember?
Michael and his mustard sandwiches.
Uh-huh. He used to like the
And
mustard
Michael
sandwiches.
in, that large window that was in the dining room.
Yes.
We had, Michael would stand there, but for the longest time, just playing with his cars up and down.
Really?
And I remember when it was time for Michael to go to kindergarten, I asked Dr. Jenkins, when I took him for his physical and his shots for kindergarten, if there wasn't, he didn't know, some place in the mountains or some place where I could take Michael and hide him so that wouldn't have to go to school and be with the other children, because he was a very, very also even-tempered, but he was just a good baby, a good child.
Huh. Oh, that's great. Now the next child was the last child, and I as I recall, Brian. We're talking, of course, of about you. Brian was unexpected and he wasn't planned. Is that correct?
Well, none of you children were really planned. You were all accepted.
Okay. Well, yeah.
Never planned.
Obviously, we were accepted, but it was Brian. Brian was a surprise, wasn't he? He was born. How old were you when you had Brian?
I was 42.
42 years old. Okay. So and the age difference between Brian and Michael?
5 years. I'll remember the day that we brought Brian home from the hospital. Michael was being watched by a neighbor, and he walked in the door and he put his arms up and he says, "Now I'm not the baby."
Really?
So,
And what memories do you have of Brian as a young child? Everybody was really fond of Brian.
that Brian was really the family, baby, you might say, because Carol was 17,
Mm-hmm.
and as I said, 5 years. Michael, he was just, everybody babied, and everybody would tell me that Brian was spoiled, that we spoiled Brian, and I used to tell you kids, get right in line behind me.
Yeah. Let's just touch base on something that we talked about briefly on our break here a few minutes ago. Raising 10 children, having 10 children. What you don't see that. It's very, very rare today that you would have 10 children. Did you come under a lot of criticism, or certain criticism from people for having such a large family?
Oh yes.
And who would be critical of you? I mean, because we lived in a neighborhood where you had the Fitzsimons. They had 7 or 8 children, didn't they?
Right.
And you had the Wilsons.
Well, it wasn't within our necessary neighborhood, and
No.
was not necessarily when I was at home raising the children. But nowadays, if I tell somebody, they say, "How many children do you have?" 10, and it's just, it's just, you had 10 children. It's just,
Yeah.
that's just the way it is. But I never thought of myself as having 10 children. I always tried to think of myself as having 10 individuals.
Yes. When you think about this one thing, having children is really a crapshoot insofar as how they're going to turn out, and Dad and you were really fortunate in that you had 10 children, 11 children with Jimmy. You had 11 children, and they have all turned out fairly, I mean, with the exception of myself, of course. You know, I mean, all the children have turned
Tom,
out,
you have turned out.
all the children have turned out, you know, pretty well.
I think you've all
Right.
turned out exceptionally well. But I think it was the example that you were given, you know,
Mhm.
growing up. And whereas you didn't think, you know, that I think it was discipline
Hmm.
to teach you and motivation. I always, and as you know, your father graduated from college when I was expecting Michael. So he would come home from working full days at work, study, and so forth. And you children, I don't know if you do remember, you all went to his graduation
Hmm.
when he graduated from college. So I think you were motivated to be educated and to seek out things. And each one of you children, I remember you all worked your own way through school, because I had a firm belief that I would not do one for one that could not be done for the youngest. And so you children all found your own way through school, through scholarships and working. And you got your education because you wanted it. And it meant more to each one of you because you did it. It was not given to you.
Huh.
And I think that is something really to be commended.
Oh, okay. So, in drawing this conversation to a close, let's talk about one other aspect of who you are that I think anyone that knows you defines you, and that is your faith and your belief in God.
Right.
And that is the I mean, share that with us. I mean, that is something that is really important to you, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is the core. Because I could not have gone through the raising of all of you children without the help of my faith.
Hmm. And that is something. Is your faith something that was instilled in you, you know, by your parents?
Absolutely.
Was it something that you've developed on
My
your
parents
own?
lived their faith. It was not anything that was outside of them. It was the very core of them. My father, when he was, for all the years that I can remember, he made a visit to the Blessed Sacrament every day of his life. And he would, no matter if it was 0 or below, he would come home from working a full day, taking 2 buses and a streetcar to come home because we didn't have a car.
Mhm.
And then he would walk a mile over to church after dinner and back because of his faith.
Huh.
And my mother, as I said, she was always a very
Faith-based person.
yes.
Okay. So is there anything else that we might have overlooked, or anything else that you want to share with anybody who might be watching this about yourself?
No, I think that from what we've talked about, people would have an idea of who I was, who I am,
Hmm.
and
And do you think it's possible that we might be able to actually get this on tape and make it official that I was your favorite? I mean, is that something that we can,
oh,
just
absolutely,
share with everybody that
absolutely, you can do that.
Tom was your favorite and continues to be your favorite?
Because you know what, that just reminds me that I don't think I could have done this without maintaining a sense of humor.